Daddy, what are you doing?
We're recording a podcast.
Who's listening?
Islander fans are listening.
Where are they?
Well, they're right here.
Welcome to the Isles Faithful Podcast with your host, Michael Sherline.
All right, welcome back to the Isles Faithful Podcast. I am your host, Michael Sherline, as always, and this is episode 27. Today is Saturday, March 9th, 2019, and today I am joined by Brett Cyrgalis of the New York Post. Brett, how's it going?
It's good, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm enjoying this unexpected year of fantastic hockey here from the New York Islanders. How's everything going on your end, covering the team?
Everything's good. Yeah. Started full-time right about March 1st, covering them, traveling them with them. Nice to see that the paper cares so much about them, and they're interested in this run. I think a lot of people, even casual hockey fans, are kind of curious about what the Islanders are doing. I mean, nobody expected them to be where they are. They have a couple of interesting characters, especially in Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz, two established guys. So, interesting story, and I'm happy to, chronicle it and see where it goes over the next month plus.
Have you ever dealt with Lou Lamoriello in the past? I'm pretty sure you've covered a couple of the local teams, right?
Yeah, I've dealt with Lou quite a bit in the past. Really straight shooter. Lou's thing is that he always, even when I was young, I would call him and he would always call me back. Always. That was always his thing. He'd always call you back. He wouldn't tell you anything, but he would always call you back. And that's kind of still the way he is that he always will talk. He'll always make his players available, but they won't say anything. So that's kind of the way he is, which is, it makes it okay to deal with, to be honest, because there's no BS with Lou. And so he's a good guy to deal with.
It sounds like, from all accounts, I met him a couple of times back when I covered the Islanders, and he always gave everybody a little bit of his time, which was always welcoming, and it's great to get to a couple of quotes from, even if, like you said, he doesn't really give you much. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I know
absolutely.
as a fan, I'm ecstatic that we've got the management now where we haven't really in the past, and that's not a complete knock on Snow. I didn't really hate on him as much as maybe some other people, because I think he laid groundwork, for Lou to come in and obviously, has a bunch of talent there that he's able to see and maybe potentially move in the future. You never really know. So, I mean, there's that. And then you have, obviously, this wild card in Barry Trotz, which he came in and is, like we talked about already, turned this team into something that nobody really anticipated, which has been pretty exciting to watch up until this point. So, tell us a little bit about practice today. I saw that a couple of the injured and sick bodies have returned.
Yeah, it looks like Matt Martin's ready to go. My guess is, he probably comes in for Ross Johnson, who's really played pretty well. Other than that, Cal was on the ice. Cal Clutterbuck was on the ice, so he's getting closer. I don't think he's going to play. Robin Leonard has not skated yet, so Trotz called him day to day, which is a little concerning. I don't want to speculate here, but when you see somebody who's had his issues in the past get a concussion, you worry. At least I do, of thinking, is he going to be okay? And because concussions are very difficult things to go through. So just as a human being, not even as a fan, or someone who cares about what happens in the games. You hope as a human being he's okay. So they're calling him day to day, which is I guess positive, but he hasn't been on the ice, so that's kind of where they stand. And they have a lot of depth, like I wrote yesterday in today's paper. There's a lot of depth, so that's one of their strengths. So they're hoping to utilize that.
Yes, and to expand a little bit on what you said about the concussions and everything that Robin has gone through personally with his struggles, you look up to Buffalo to what Kyle Oposo went through and the struggles he kind of, unexpectedly was brought through with, the anxiety and the darkness that he went through with the concussion. And brain injuries are such a crazy, thing. And as much as they know, they as in the medical experts, there's so much you don't know. And I think that's why the focus on CTE and all this other brain injury stuff throughout not just the NHL, but like the NFL and soccer and, is so crazy. And it's a scary thing. And Robin has had this year where it's a bounce back year for him. I think the talent has always been there. Maybe he wasn't surrounded by, other type of talent like in Buffalo, because they struggled while he was on the team. And obviously with his personal issues, once he got past that talent was able to come back through, especially under the tutelage of the Islanders goaltending staff that they picked up in the offseason.
Yeah. And when you get into these brain injury things, it's, I'm not rooting for the Islanders. I don't root for the Rangers, although both fan bases think I root for the opposite. But when you get to know these guys a little bit, and Kyle's a good example, he's a really good guy, and when something like that happens to somebody that is a good person, it's affecting, and you hope that they get better. That's a really bad spot. Like, you think about his wife and his family, and everybody has family, and in that, it becomes human. Like, the human side of the game is something that's lost, and when you get these head injuries, and it's worrisome. Robin seems like a really good guy, and he's gone through a lot, and you worry about if there's chemical imbalance already, then how does this affect it? And if concussions bring on anxiety and depression, and this is somebody who has a history of that, then you worry that it's going to exacerbate the situation. So, of course, the Islanders are not saying it's a concussion, but it's pretty clear that's what happened, and you hope the guy gets better. You hope he's okay, no matter what team he plays for, really.
I think one of the most telling things there, and not to avoid the whole good guy thing, because I agree, Kyle is a great guy. I was fortunate enough to get to know him a little bit during my time around the team, and you always feel for the families involved too, because I've mentioned on this podcast numerous times now that there's the human factor that I think a lot of people forget. And I think that's
no question. Yeah.
That's a big thing. These are still human beings with lives outside of hockey. It just so happens that they have a really cool job, kind of like you covering the sport that so many people love. You get to write about it.
It's like John Tavares is a human being too, but we'll leave that one aside.
You know what though? I again, he gets paid to play a sport, and we pay, most of us anyway, pay to watch this great game and to be fans. So I think, without going too far into this, because I went through this a couple of episodes in a row.
Sure you did, yeah.
It's part of the game. You got to take the good with the bad. You'll be booed, you'll be cheered, you'll be yelled at, you'll be cursed at.
Listen, you could call me whatever name you want for $11 million a year.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I forgot my point. I think a big telling thing with the call up of Gibson is that it was on an emergency basis, and
well, there's no reason not to do it on an emergency basis, because if he was going to sit out anyway, then there's no reason to waste a call up. So the emergency can stay there as long as Leonard's hurt.
That's true.
So he can stay the rest of the year on an emergency. So there's no reason to make it a real call up.
All right. Well, we'll just hope that it's not anything major, and
right.
We're not going to dwell into the complete negative of this, and we'll just, like they're doing it day by day. We as people who cover the team and talk about the team. We'll take it day by day as well. So
Yeah.
what now have you seen out of Barry Trotz? Maybe that's been a night and day difference from, the daily skates and the practices maybe that, fans don't really get to see, prior to.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the biggest difference is that it's hard to put this in the right light, because I don't want to take away from what Doug Waite did, because I think he could still be a good coach in this league, and I don't want to take away from Jack Capuano, because I think he could be a good coach in this league too. But the professionalism, the level has raised so much higher. It's shocking, like how much different the feel is around the team, where like just the way the players go about the everyday. It's not. They're still loose. They're still having fun, but it's different. It's a little more buttoned up. It's a little more. They're like, you don't want to say they're taking it more seriously, but that's kind of the way it feels. And the thing is, a coach comes in and he won a Stanley Cup last year. How do you not listen to the guy? A lot of players were friends with Doug, and Doug's a tremendous person. There's no reason not to be friends with the guy, but it's different when a guy comes in and he just won a Stanley Cup, and he's coached in the league for 20 years. It's a different feel. So he gets everybody's attention, and that happens no matter what, no matter who was before and who was coming after. That happens with every coaching change, where people are paying attention and they're going to go really hard for the new guy. But I think there is an immense amount of respect for Barry, his history and the way he goes about his business. So, it's everything's kind of a little bit different around the team, and they're not the same kind of feeling and storylines of woe is me, the old Islanders, us against the world. It's kind of a little bit different now. And he's a big part of it, and Lou's a big part of it. Like, the word culture is so overused, but there's a reason it is, because the culture around the team has really changed quite a bit, and the way the guys practice every day, and the way they go into games, and the way they prepare, it's a little bit different. And Barry Trotz is a huge part of that, and so is Lou Lamoriello. So, the whole franchise just has a different feel about them with those guys in charge.
I think that was a big part in bringing guys like Lamoriello and Barry Trotz in, because the Islanders organization was viewed upon by many throughout the league, especially Rangers fans and fans in Toronto, that they were like a third-rate place to play. And I think a lot of times you have players that come here maybe not really expecting that, and then they never want to leave. The Islanders, when they traded for Lubomir Wisnowski a couple of seasons ago, and he originally tried to block the trade, he ultimately didn't really want to leave here. And then we had a couple of other players the same way. Evgeny Nabokov wound up loving it here. And that kind of goes to show, in the past, maybe the Islanders haven't been able to land that star free agent or get a trade going with someone that they could have improved with. But now, they have the awesome practice facility that was named yesterday after Bill Torrey, which today is also Bill Torrey Day. So
yeah.
I think all of that is part of building a winning championship team here, and that starts at the ground level and even through management, like they've been doing. So I'm happy to see it. And as much as Lou may be towards the later part of his career, I would still take a Hall of Famer over, someone who maybe didn't have the type of talent, coming into the league.
Yeah, and that's all part of it, And I remember when Nystrom's kid came in with Nashville, he brought his whole team out to their house, and I think they lived in Oyster Bay or something, and they brought him out, and he was like, I wanted to show you guys that Long Island is great. It's not just this Marriott, because everybody that came in, that was it. It was the Marriott and the Coliseum. They were like, this place stinks. It was like, no, Long Island's actually really nice, and you see a lot of these guys that come, and now they're all embedded, These guys that have, like Josh Bailey and Thomas Hickey, these guys have, they're embedded in communities. Like then they love it here. And that's part of it. And now with free agency, a guy like Panarin, he's going to look around and go, all right, where am I going? And when he comes to Long Island, it's like, well, okay, maybe it was nice, but it was still the organization, the way it was run, maybe with different ownership, it was a different feel. Now you come in and it's okay. Well, the places to live are nice, schools are great, and then it's run by Lou Lamoriello and a coach who just won the Stanley Cup, and a team who is like this management team and coaching staff has gotten the most they could possibly get out of the talent on this team. So add some more talent, and then it seems like it's, without a question, it doesn't seem, there's no question, it's become a more attractive place for people to want to come play in the last year. So hopefully they can use that to their advantage. And
now we just need to get a shovel in the ground for Belmont, because it just seems you got this negative press by some of the people who are dead set against it, and I know Jim Baumbach has kind of poo-pooed that in his reporting, because he's been on this from the very beginning with the Lighthouse Project. So
that's so stupid. I just don't get it. I think these, like, listen, I understand. The thing that I find most concerning as a real objection would be the emergency vehicles, like the cops and the firemen saying, like, okay, listen, if there's more traffic, like we might not be able to get to a hospital, but we're talking about traffic 41 nights a year, right? And for how many, for what, 2 hours maybe? So there's no way you can get around that. And that, the tax implications, the amount of money that is going to be brought in, it just doesn't, I don't understand why you would be against it. And I guess if you live there, very close to the place, maybe you don't want the extra, the traffic and the attention and the whole deal. But, what's that going to do to your home price? Like, I just don't understand. I don't understand why people are against it that much. And from all I can gather, this was still part of the schedule. Everything is still pretty much on schedule. So when you start going through this political red tape, it gets a little sticky, I guess, if you will. So hopefully they can just get through this and get a shovel in the ground and build a rink that is worthy of the fan base and the team.
Well, they definitely showed, meaning the fan base, that if you build it, they're going to come. I mean, we've come out to the Coliseum, and the Coliseum, as much as it's much nicer, is still the Coliseum. It's still too small, and getting around the concourse is still a nightmare, as much as they opened up inside the top of the 200s, that inner ring. But I think, to close on the whole arena situation, once they get a shovel in the ground and there's definitive progress there that free agents can see, and I don't really think a lot of free agents are going to base their decision on, the current. It's a lot to do with the future. So and the guys talk, obviously. So if there's a guy that's played with Panarin, and that's going to be Nick Leddy, I'm sure they're going to reach out to each other and say, hey, it's not all about what you read in the paper or hear about through hearsay. It's a real thing. Things are happening here behind the scenes, and I think you should play here. So, yeah,
and that's part of Tavares' decision too. Not to harp on that, but all right. So you stick around. You're going to bet like they didn't know the deal with the Coliseum, and you're going to bounce around for the next couple of years, and then by the time that starts, now you're at the back end of your prime. That's part of the deal too. You can't forget that. That also playing half the games at the Coliseum and the Barclays was a nightmare. Like these guys didn't want to do that. The team didn't want to do that. They don't want to go to Brooklyn at all. But that's part of the conversation without a question. And then once the shovel gets in the ground, then it's okay. Well, it's you can talk about it and say like, hey, yeah, things are actually going well. Like it's going to happen, but it's like you want to see it happen. And then once they're building it, it's okay. Well, then I get they're going to build it, and then maybe I'll sign a 7-year deal. That's a commitment. Moving your family, the whole deal. You want to make sure you like where you're going. So I do. I just hope that doesn't fall apart, because that would be disastrous.
Well, let's not really go down that path right now.
Right.
Let's move on into some more pressing things, and that's some of the players here today. You wrote about Anders Lee and how he's having maybe a down year and how that could potentially affect contract moving forward. But I want to point out that guys that are playing without Tavares, in Josh Bailey, Brock Nelson, Anders Lee, they're having great years. I think the only player that's really struggling, and he didn't really play all that much with John Tavares, is Jordan Eberle. So why don't you give me some of your feelings on that?
Yeah, well, the scoring's down, right? So, in general, the team is scoring less than it did last year. But like Anders said the other day in Ottawa, it was these guys would trade their numbers to be in first place, and him being a leader in the room, that's what he was kind of hinting at in negotiations, is that it's not necessarily about strictly numbers. He knows exactly how many goals he has. Believe me, everybody does. But he wants more. Of course he wants to score 40 again, but he hopes that doesn't color the negotiations so much that it's like, well, he had a down year and that's it, and that's it's going to cost him millions. He's hoping that it's like, look at the team, like, we're winning. I'm the captain of a team that's in first place, that's overachieving. That's got to be worth the equivalent of how many goals, and I've shown that I can score 40 goals. You can't argue that he's not one of the best net front guys in the league. He is. And there's no reason to think that he won't continue to be that guy.
I mean, just look at what they said about him when they played Ottawa the other night. The head coach there, Crawford, said, we want Brady Tkachuk to be an Anders Lee type of guy.
And boy, can Brady Tkachuk play? Holy cow, he's going to be really good.
I didn't really realize how good he was up until we played them back to back, and the way he's greasy. I mean, Brock Nelson lost him multiple times.
Well, yeah, that's not the first time that's happened, but he's that's the first time I've watched Brady in person. He's going to be a really good player. He is. But getting back to the other guys, Eberle obviously is in a pretty serious drought right now. And that's going to, when Lou, you look at those guys and he goes through the deadline, right, with a specifically Nelson, Eberle. We'll just leave it at those two guys, because I'm pretty sure that they have some sort of understanding that that contract's going to get taken care of. But with Nelson and Eberle, it's UFA. Are you gonna sign him? Why didn't you trade him? Why weren't they out, at least very far out there, like down the road in negotiations? And there's no reason to rush it. Let's see what happens. And Lou said, this is an indication we really like our guys, but how much do you like them? Let's see, okay, prove yourself, right? So they still have time. There's still a month left in the season, and then in the postseason, you're either going to prove that we'll commit to you long term for big money, or maybe we'll want you to stick around on a shorter term deal. There's still a lot to be shown by these guys. So when you look at their numbers, it's like, Lou's been around a long time. He understands that it's not just about numbers, that the fact that Anders Lee isn't going to score 40 again doesn't mean that he's not the same player he was last year. And the fact that Jordan Eberle is not going to put up huge numbers. And Brock's having a good year, but where do they stand on negotiations? Like, what's it going to equal? It's kind of, there's no reason for Lou to rush to these conclusions. So he was in kind of a tough spot at the deadline where do you want to trade him? Do you want to shop him? You can't really trade guys when you're in first place. You can't really go into seller mode. So he's got a lot of decisions to make coming up in terms of what he thinks about these guys, and I'm sure a lot of what he's going to think about them at the negotiating table is going to be determined by what happens over the next 6 weeks or so.
And I think a lot of people haven't really taken that into account, especially the predicament that Lou found himself in with John not re-signing with the New York Islanders in July. You had guys like Brock Nelson and Jordan Eberle and Anders Lee going into free agency, and they became placeholders in a sense because they were evaluating the roster and not really knowing what to expect, because I'm sure, like we've said, nobody expected the Islanders to be first in the Metro and be first in the Metro for close to 2 months. Obviously now here, as things are tightening down towards the stretch before the playoffs, things are going to bounce back and forth, and it's a matter of whether or not they can find their play again. But they're not going to make a decision when they're in first place, obviously, because why are you going to take away from the roster? I was more surprised that they didn't really add a little bit of offensive depth. Obviously, the biggest struggle for them right now has been offense, and they have drips and drabs of games where you see them reel off 4 or 5 goals. But then again, those same games, it seems that the defensive end of things doesn't tighten up the way that they've been in the past. It's like it's either one or the other, unless there's a high emotion game like the Rangers or against Toronto, where they get the best of both worlds in the game, or all three really: offense, defense, and goaltending. Yeah.
It was a very odd spot for Lou at that deadline because, like I said, you can't trade anyone off of first place. Like I bet you he would have preferred to be in a wild card spot, because then it's just easier. The decisions are easier. And I think with the fact that why they didn't add, it's what's it going to take to get, because they were never going to rent a player. They weren't in that market. Like that was never going to happen. Because why? You rent a player and then what? You make it you win a round, maybe you win 2, and then what? Now you've lost a prospect or something, and so I'm sure Lou was in the market for a good young addition, a guy who could stick around and be part of the team. But then when you look at the Islanders' assets, the prospects that they have are not. The league is not in love with them. Like even Beauvillier was in those talks, and he wasn't getting a deal done. That wasn't happening. Like you weren't getting Mark Stone for Beauvillier and some picks. Like it wasn't happening. And then when you look at the prospects, it's like, all right, you go down the list, and the guys they drafted last year, it's like, yeah, they're still so young that they're still draftees, But then when you look at like a Ho-Sang and guys like that, it's like there's almost no value for Ho-Sang on the market, and everyone goes like, oh, you got to trade this guy. It's like, well, for what? Like who's going to give you anything for Josh Ho-Sang? The guy was scratched this year in Bridgeport. Like, what do you think you're going to get for him? A 5th, 6th round pick, and then why are you even doing it? Then you're like, let's just hope he gets better. Like that's kind of where you're at. So I understand like the desire for fans wanting them to add, and they need to be better offensively. And the power play, I think, is bad. Like it's a bad power play. Nick Leddy is not a first power play quarterback. Like that is just not his strength. But there wasn't a lot out there. There wasn't a lot to do. It didn't make sense. There was nothing out there that made a lot of sense because of the assets they had and what was being asked. So Lou was kind of handcuffed, and it's like, all right, well, you're the team that got in first place, so keep playing, and we'll figure it out this summer with eyes on guys like Panarin and Carlson and whomever else ends up being kind of on their radar.
And that's good points too, because now, as much as some of the prospects in the Islanders system aren't viewed as blue chip prospects by some of the league. They still have value to the Islanders, and there's a lot of wild cards there in some of the younger players. So now you're going into the free agent period in July with your full range of picks. You didn't give up a single one. You've got some assets that you could potentially move. And then you have this ridiculous amount of cap space that a lot of other teams aren't going to have. So you can offer a little bit more money and term, especially over some of the other players. So I think they're lined up. They're in a good position to make moves in July. And I wasn't really disappointed. I mean, as a fan, maybe, and the excitement level to be able to talk about it and write about it, yes. But to be able to go into the offseason full bore with every asset available to you, I think is a huge thing. So now I want to talk about the power play. Now, what do you see maybe internally, some of the movement around on the different units to maybe spark a little bit more offense there? I mean, you obviously get to see them in practice pretty much every day. What is your opinion on what they can do to fix it?
I don't know if there's a quick fix. Like, I don't think flipping two guys is going to make that big a difference. I almost like the second unit a little bit better with Taves and Pulak. And Pulak just shoots it every single time he gets it, which is, it's a little simpler. It's a little bit easier, and so, like, I don't know. Do you want to make that the first unit and you put Andersley in front? Because Pulak's not going to score on a lot of those shots, but a lot of them create rebounds. And you put him there. I mean, these are that's you're deep inside hockey at this point, and that's what is Scott Gomez really doing? We're trying to make it better because the first unit, those guys they're talented, and Barzal, the way he handles it on the sideboard, and he makes that cross ice saucer pass so effortlessly that that's such a weapon. But when Brock Nelson's the guy catching it, and then it's like, how fast can you get that shot off? It's not an easy play, but it's a talent thing, and power plays a lot or talent, right? So it's just like you're right. You look at the Penguins' power play, or you look at the Capitals' power play, and it's like, well, yeah, these are all elite players. And the Islanders are not, they're good players, but they're not elite. So that's kind of what separates you. On the power play, you got to make power play goals are normally scored on great plays. Like somebody makes a really talented, skilled play. So, that's one of the reasons when you start thinking about where this team is going to go and how far they're going to go, it's like, well, you can't win multiple rounds in the playoffs with a mediocre power play. And I know the Bruins won a Stanley Cup with a terrible power play, but it's very rare that because then teams will take penalties and you don't take advantage of it. Those are when you get into tight games, you'll see it now in the next month of the regular season. The games get so tight that you don't get many opportunities, and a lot of your opportunities are on the power play. You have to score on the power play. So they need to be better at that, and if it doesn't get any better, they are what they are. So it should be interesting to see what happens. And to be honest, I think it's kind of a little bit of an assessment on what kind of coach Scott Gomez is, because what is he going to do are there going to be any technical differences? Is he going to do anything differently now that they're kind of in this big time lull? So that's definitely a thing to keep an eye on.
And it's unfortunate also that, he's got ties to Lou Lamoriello. I'm sure that Barry would have wanted to bring in his whole, own coaching staff. And for the most part, it looks like he did with, the guys he brought in. But
yeah, well, I'll tell you this. Scott Gomez is not sticking around because he's friends with Lou Lamoriello. If Lou doesn't think he can coach, he will no longer be a coach. So maybe he stuck around because Lou thought he could do a good job, But if he's not doing a good job, he's not going to stick around. So.
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't.
I'm sure. And he is a good hockey mind. You know, he was a great player and he sees the game, and you could tell there's a lot of trust in him by Barry Trotz, because you'll see him with the dry erase board during a timeout or, you know, coming off a commercial break. So there is that. It's just a matter of, you know, he's the lone leftover from Doug Waite's staff, and you have to wonder, you know, and I would be crazy if I didn't wonder, like, why is he still around? But again, like you said, you know, if Lou didn't think he can coach, or Barry didn't think he would coach or could coach, I'm sure he wouldn't
be here. Yeah, right, exactly.
So now, what about with Michael Dow Cole? Do you think you could potentially see him on one of the power play units? I love his game. He's come full circle from his first call up, and it seems like he's able to drive the play a little bit and use his body and his head. And that pass over to Devon Taves the other night was just money in the bank. That was amazing.
Yeah, you know, he's playing really well. He is, like, right, it's 2 games, right? So let's not get carried away, but you know, he's a guy. He looked like he was going to be a bust. You know, I mean, such a high draft pick, not elite talent. So what are you really getting? But this is the game he needs to play. He needs to be a really reliable two-way guy. He can't be a liability. He needs to be somebody that the coaches can trust, because he's not Matt Barzal in talent. He can't get away with turning the puck over. He needs to be, you know, a solid guy, and that's exactly what he's doing. And then it seems like, you know, he's playing with so much more confidence right now, because, you know, if when he was called up the first time, like, does he make that pass, Taves? Like, probably not, right? He probably makes a simpler play and takes the shot, and then nothing happens, right? So he seems like he's playing with more confidence, and that's huge. They need, you know, the less you have to rely on Leo Komarov and Fapulo, like, you know, the more you can look at a guy like Del Call and kind of give him more responsibility just for this year and definitely going forward. You know, that's a big step for the organization. They need him. They were hoping that he was going to be a really good player, and he's kind of just about coming into it right now. And he knows it. You talk to him, and he knows that he's a restricted free agent. He knows where he stands in terms of his reputation as a prospect and where he is in his career, and he wants to be better. So I think he's just kind of starting to show that he's moving in the right direction, and the franchise really could use that.
All right. Well, I mean, I hope that he definitely sticks to the way that he's playing, because he's obviously more helpful to the team right now if he continues the way that he's playing. So we'll move into tonight before we start to wrap it up here. We faced the Flyers, which gave us a bunch of trouble the other day. Granted, we seemed to outplay them the whole game, or the Islanders outplayed them the whole game. And they just capitalized on like the 3 or 4 scoring chances that they had, unfortunately. So what can the Islanders do to improve their play against the Flyers tonight?
Well, you know, the Flyers are one of those teams that just, you know, when they fire their coach and, you know, everybody's favorite Scott Gordon comes in, you know, they just started playing better. Like, they, you know, there's talent on that roster. And, you know, I think Claude Giroux is, you know, when he's going, he's one of the best players in the league. And then people follow, and the rest of the team follows. And the young guys, you know, you talk to guys around the league, young players, especially like French Canadians, and Giroux is the guy. Like, they love Claude Giroux. So when he's going, you know, the team kind of follows. So they started playing well, and they got the goalie, the kid, Hart, you know. And I don't know if he was hurt for a little while, so I don't know who's playing tonight actually for them. But you know, they have some things going for them, and the coaching change kind of woke them up a little bit. And so now they're kind of teetering on. I think that, you know, I'd say they're a long shot for the playoffs, but they've played so well for a while, so they've, it's hard. Like when coaches say some cliches, you kind of roll your eyes. But the fact that one of them is it's hard to win in this league is true. I mean, even the Senators, it's half an AHL team, but they go hard. They were going hard in this home and home. So it wasn't a cakewalk. It wasn't easy. So the Flyers are one of those teams too that they're going to play hard and they're going to make you earn it. And 2 weeks from now, when they're out of it, maybe it's a little different. And same for other teams, but right now it's teams are still going hard. And these guys, they're prideful pros. They're playing for jobs. They're getting paid a lot of money to play this game. So that's what they're doing, and it's not easy to go out there and win. So the Flyers, every game from here on out is going to be difficult. Nothing's going to be easy. So that's just one of the things that the Islanders are going to have to deal with, and that that's what they're doing tonight. They're going to have if they want to continue to be where they are, they have to continue to win games like this. So and to do that, they need to play better than they've played for the last 2 weeks. So we'll see how they straighten it out.
I think a lot of it was going to fall on Barry Trotz because now you're going to see the type of coach that he is. And I said this in the episode that I posted yesterday, it's time to Trotz because you've got a guy that is a fantastic coach like Barry, and he's utilizing days off to get their minds right. I know you don't need to work on stuff, but you need to think about it. And I'm sure that his meetings and, the preparation for teams like the Flyers and like Ottawa, there aren't going to be any easy games. There's going to be a bunch of teams playing spoiler. And the Islanders, you saw the Islanders succeed in the spoiler role for how many years? So when you've got a team that is not playing for much, they're playing for jobs, that's more dangerous than a team going down the stretch, like now Tampa having secured a playoff spot already, which is just insane. Yeah. Absolutely insane.
Right.
You have a team like them, and they're going to be able to now rest guys. They're going to be able to nurse some injuries and stuff. So they're not really going to play quite as hard as a team like the Flyers, who are not mathematically eliminated. So that's definitely going to be interesting down the stretch here to see how they respond.
Yeah, I mean, well, a team like the Lightning, they can rest players and play 50% and still beat you. So every game is going to be tough because you got teams coming at you trying to play spoiler, guys playing for jobs, and then you got teams that are kind of cruising, and they're so talented that they could still beat you. So it's not easy.
Well, my only hope is that the Islanders find their groove again, like they did for pretty much the entire month of January, and they get solid defensive effort, and they get a little bit of run support here for Thomas Greiss, and you can only hope that he is on top of his game, and they at least have a chance to win every night. I mean, that's the only thing we could really hope for, and not really focus on remaining in first in the Metro with the way that everything is so tight here. They're only like 7 or 8 points from being on the outside looking in, and that's kind of a scary thing with how tight things are.
Yeah, I mean they'll consider just kind of every night as its own deal, but a collapse would be catastrophic. I mean, and it's not too far off. It's not like they're 15 points clear of the team just out of the second wild card. I mean, they have a bad stretch. You're going to be, you can go down very fast. And with 3-point games, all these games going, especially now, it's going to be so tight. Games going overtime. It's like it's going to be hard to move. It's very hard to move up. So if they start losing, then it's going to be. You could go down very fast. It's just very hard to move up. So they do need to figure it out, because if it goes bad, it could go bad fast.
I think a positive there is they haven't really had a sustained losing streak here of more than 2 or 3 games max, and I think one of those was even a loss in a shootout or overtime. So
yeah, and like that home and home with Ottawa was like those games. They were terrible games. Like believe me, I was there. They were terrible, but they won. You know, I mean, like they found a way to win, and a lot of players will say that. That was always Henrik Lundqvist's line, and still is. I'm sure you got to find a way to win, whether you play well and the bounces aren't going your way, or you play poorly and you just have to kind of be opportunistic. You have to find a way, and good teams find a way. So if they're going to be a good team, they're going to, that's what you do. You find a way to win, and that's what they did against Ottawa. So that was a good sign for them stabilizing.
I wanted to touch base with you about one more thing about that Ottawa game, and what was Valtteri Filppula's thought process there with the puck on his stick for his first career NHL hat trick that he wasn't able to seal the deal on? Did he have anything good to say?
It's kind of like I'm a scratch golfer and I don't have a hole in one. He's played 900 games in the league and he doesn't have a hat trick. It's like one of those things that's just not. It just hasn't come. So that's kind of the way he kind of laughed about it a little bit, and there's nothing you can do. He tried. The team tried to get it to him, but it's just one of those things where like, it doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't matter that you haven't scored 3 in one game. He's had a nice career. I don't think he's really too worried about not having one, but he'd like to. So he was just kind of kicking himself that it still hasn't come. So,
well, if he keeps playing the way that he has, it's definitely going to come. He's been a pleasant surprise this year, and I think the haters on some of those moves by Lou Lamoriello have gone quiet here with how great he's been. Komarov, obviously, I hope that he could chip in a little more offensively, but that's not the type of player he is. And Tommy Kuhnhackl, like Barry keeps saying, I mean, every time he calls on him, he does his job, and that's all you can ask from a veteran who seems to get spot duty here. And moving into the playoffs, guys like them are going to, carry the younger guys on their back and teach them everything it is to be a pro. So there's that.
Yeah, Trotz even said this morning about Kuhnhackl, he's been here. He knows what it's like now. He knows what the playoffs are like. And he's gonna kind of lean on a guy like that. Like, I don't know if that means he's gonna play a lot more, but he's gonna lean on a guy like that in these spots that have experience, at the very least, to show the kids this is how you do it. This is how you prepare. This is how you raise your level when it needs to go up. So, and when they signed those guys, when they signed Filppula and Komarov, it was for times like this. It wasn't to see them. It wasn't believing that Leo was going to score 30 goals. It's because he's a leader and he's a veteran, and it's times like this when it matters the most to have those guys in the locker room. So that's kind of what they're looking at.
I also think that maybe they didn't expect Anders Lee to step up and be as much of a voice in the room, because obviously they didn't have much experience with him coming into training camp in July. So you sign guys like that, to be the veteran voice in the room. And then, like Barry said, guys tend to float to the top, and you could pick the veterans out right away, or not the veterans, but the captains right away. And, Anders has been that guy, I think, that can carry the team and be the voice of the team and motivate in ways that John Tavares was never really able to, I think. So, I mean, I'm excited about the stretch run here down towards the playoffs. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a great learning experience for everyone, and in a way for the staff to kind of figure out what they have and what they need to do in July, and hopefully they make some noise.
Yeah, it should be fun to watch. I wrote the other day, the Islanders are not winning the Stanley Cup, so don't go crazy, but it should be fun to watch because they're building a franchise and a culture, and it's a history, the history of the franchise. And tonight with Bill Torrey's family being there, I mean, these guys take that seriously. And like we were talking about before, like the people, the guys being in the community, they care about it. They care about the franchise. So this run will kind of, and they have such a wide open future with what they're gonna do, what Lou's gonna do, what the team's gonna look like next year. do people want to come here and play? There's a lot up in the air, and a lot of it will be kind of, the tone will be set, if you will, over the next 4-6 weeks. So it should be fun to watch.
All right. Well, hopefully I can have you back on here in the next couple of weeks, especially closer to the playoffs. It'd be great to have a little bit of a primer from you. And why don't you give everybody, what all your socials are and where they could read your stuff and all that?
Yeah, well, it's Twitter at Brett Cyrgalis, Cyrgalis, and nypost.com. You can always go there. Tons of good hockey coverage. We cover hockey like nobody else in New York, and it's great. And we appreciate how much our paper does in terms of supporting travel and being at practices every day. And I don't think fans quite understand how much goes into that in terms of a commitment of time and financial commitment to doing all that. So it means a lot that they care about hockey, because us that care about the league and care about covering the teams, it's great, and it's fun. It's going to be. I'm looking forward to it, to covering this team for however long they play, because they're kind of they're an interesting story, and there's interesting characters, and there's a lot going on, and the history of the franchise and the community. I mean, it should be fun. So check it out on NewYorkPost.com, buy the paper, and everyone will be happy.
And I wanted to have you on because I know you get hammered by Islander fans.
But every Islander fan thinks I'm a Ranger fan. Every Ranger fan thinks I'm an Islander fan, and I haven't been a fan in 15 years. So
well, that's why I wanted to have you on, Brett. I appreciate you coming on. It's been fun. And just to touch base on something that you brought up earlier, I actually played against Eric Nystrom in high school. Did you? Nice. He was not the player that he turned into. His dad spent a lot of money on making him into who he was.
Where was that? Syosset?
Yeah, he played for Syosset. I played for Bethpage, so I had many games against Syosset and the Nystrom. So it was
Bobby
a fun
sitting
time.
in the stands is probably a little intimidating, but
it was, and yeah. playing against Eric was a little tough too, because he was much stronger and much faster than everyone, but you didn't think that he was going to make the NHL. So,
yeah. Is he still in the league? Actually, Is he still playing there?
I'm pretty sure he retired.
Yeah.
All of the Long Island boys. You had Chris Higgins, Nystrom. Pretty much everybody's retired.
Chris, right? Where did Chris play? Smithtown.
Yeah, he's from I think Smithtown.
Yeah.
So now, the only ones we have left are Keith Kincaid.
Yeah.
And one of the Devils prospects grew up.
John Gilmore? Is he? I think he's playing in Europe. Gilmore,
and then Charlie McAvoy, Long Beach product.
Right, that's right. He's a terrific player.
He is. It was fun. I worked in Long Beach for a little while, the last job I had, and when he was drafted, there was all sorts of banners and congratulatory things all over the place.
Cool.
So
yeah,
it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, but again, I appreciate you coming on. It's been fun. Hopefully,
it has been fun, Mike.
Hopefully we can do this again. Thanks everybody for listening. You can follow me at Isles Blogger, at Faithful Isles. We're on iTunes. We're on Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, all those crazy places. We're also on YouTube. Give a subscribe there. Join the Facebook page. We have a mailing list, all that fun stuff. Also, don't forget, use the code FAITHFUL10 at YesMenOutfitters.com for 10% off your entire order. So, Brett, thanks again. This has been episode 27. I'm your host, Michael Sherline. As always, let's go Isles.